everyone, and welcome to the Nordic Sound Channel. I am your host, Jameson Foster, and today we have with us some members of Hindarfjäll, Nils and Frederik. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
Yes, Torulf as
Oh,
well,
Torulf,
the
yeah.
project.
Yep.
Yeah. So yes, I am Nils from Hindarfjäll.
I'm Frederik of Torulf.
All right, awesome. And you guys played
And
together. You guys shared the stage at Midgardsblot, correct? You guys like worked together?
Yes, exactly. And Frederik also produced the first album of Hindarfjäll.
Awesome. I was a
So,
huge fan
yeah.
of that album. That one really stuck with me. So good job on the production for that. So
That's cool.
so I actually have trouble learning about you guys just from like Googling around. So I was figuring I would have you guys on the show just to learn more about you myself and give you guys an opportunity to give others an opportunity to get to know you better. So I would love to know your guys' backgrounds as musicians. Whoever wants to go first, I would like to know. You guys are in this Viking new Nordic scene now, but where do you guys come from musically?
you want to start?
You want to start? Should I start?
You can start.
I can start. So originally, actually, I'm a sucker for 80s hard rock music. So that's where everything started. Yeah. It's actually true. So it started when I was like maybe 8 years old, 9 years old. I started listening to Guns N' Roses, Skid Row, Aerosmith. That's my jam. And so when I turned 13, 14 years old, a friend of mine showed me black metal music. That's where it all starts. The extreme. And then not long after that, it led me into the Nordic folk music, such as Vardruna and these kind of bands, but actually it started with Anders Hagberg. I don't know if you heard about him, but he
No.
released a song called Stenristarna. And so that was like the start for me when it comes to the Nordic folk, Stenristarna. And then also Månegarn played a huge part in like
Yeah, they're a big
gateway.
Yeah, they're a big influence for everyone. Like most people I have on this channel, they always mention Monogarm.
Yeah. Great.
I'm not surprised.
So.
Yeah.
You're right. And how about you?
Slightly different origin story than Nils. I think when I was like a teenager, I discovered that you could make music on a laptop. So I started by making like ambient music, some like there was like a wave of like sampling and doing music like that, and I kind of fell in love with that process of creating music. So I applied to go to a university that does sound and music production, and I had a teacher that opened up a lecture by walking in, and he had like a hurdy-gurdy, which I'd never seen before. And just like standing there, not saying a word, and he just started to play it. And I was so captivated. And something happened where it was like unlocking of what was possible with that sound. And so I just fell in love with it completely. And then I realized that he said, oh, I've been in these bands from like the late 1980s and 1990s, and we were called Hedningarna. And we did like gigs and shows around the world, and it's like it was like pretty cool, So it's like, oh goddamn, I gotta hear more about this band. And then I found out that that band was kind of very well loved and like well known, which I had no idea about. And so my introduction to that genre was him playing in front of me. It's like, oh, like this is a sound that's pretty interesting. Like, what do you guys think? It's like, yeah, I love it. And so that was kind of like my introduction to the world of folk music in a new way, because like me and Nils, like in Scandinavia, when you hear about folk music when you grow up, it's it's kind of corny, you know. It's kind of like it's more like dance music and polka and like stuff that old people
for old people, exactly.
Old people to listen to, you know. And when you're a young guy or like a teenager, you're not that drawn to those kind of aspects of music. But Hindarfjäll for me was like they took something old and they redid it in a new way that was fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's funny. You have I have a similar relationship with Faun, where I didn't know they were so big. I was even I forget who was telling me about this. But it was Runehild. Runehild was telling me about how when she discovered Faun, it was huge for her, and she was the one that taught me that they are actually pretty big, and I had no idea. So it's funny hearing that you had the same relationship with Hedning on that. It happens. So have you guys always played music together, or have you guys just recently started making music together? Because I just thought
we have a really good story. We have a really good story here.
All right, yeah, please tell.
So the thing is, my father calls me one day, and he says that his colleague has a brother that makes Nordic folk music. Like, yeah, he does Nordic folk music. Yes, do you do? And I was like, oh, really? What's the name? I don't know. I have to see and let you know. And so and then he told me the name was Torulf, and I was like, yeah, I heard about that name. And at that time, I was gonna produce or make. I was in the making of Från Tidernas begynnelse, and I needed to find a guy that could produce it, like mix and master. So I wrote to Frederik, you know, and I told him about the story. Oh, you know, my father, he works with your brother, you know. And that's where it all started, you know. And then I reached out. We met the first time in real life.
Yes.
Yeah, it was in May.
That was that was during the practice, right?
The practice, yeah, for Midgårdsblot and Månegamla.
Awesome.
Yeah. So
was that your guys' first time like going to Midgårdsblot, or like not even playing? I was just was that your guys' first time there?
No.
For me, yes.
Not for you. So when was your first time there, Nils?
I was there 2016.
Oh, okay. So you were there. You were there early.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
how much is it
coming back?
Yeah, how much has it changed for you? Like comparing it to 2016 and then seeing what it's like in 2022. Like, what are the biggest differences to you?
Not so much, I would say, but you know, they changed the stage to a certain like they had the stage in the main area before the main stage, but it was pretty much the same. It's amazing place.
Oh yeah, because that's good to hear. People get scared and you know, people have been talking about this since this year. You know, the people are worried that eventually it's just gonna turn into another Vakken, where it's just like so huge that it like loses its. I'm not saying Vakken has lost its, you know, identity, but that's what people get nervous about with a place like Midgårdsblot, because as you said, it's a pretty special place and people don't want to lose that. So I think it's good for you to say, since 2016, it's still mostly the same. The stage changes a bit.
Yeah. But also, you know, 2016, I was 18 years old. I was pretty drunk most of the time. So.
I mean, but that's the normal experience.
Yeah.
So, Frederik, for you, what was it like being there for the first time?
It was a pretty interesting experience because I never been to a festival that was that open about heathen symbolism in that sense. So it was interesting to see for me that they could gather different bands and different artists that have that Nordic folk kind of aspects and elements and spirit to their music, but from different angles and different genres. So for me, it was interesting to see, because I'm very interested in different genres. I'm interested in like merging them and to explore like the creative process there. So it was really fun to see the same stage that could have like a black metal band, but also have a pop indie kind of band just like a few hours later, but they still had that kind of Nordic folk element to it. So it was fun to experience that for me.
Yeah, I that was one of the things that struck me too, you know, because I have a pretty diverse love of genres. To me, it's more about like the ideas behind it or the actual sound that draws me to music. And for me, watching Ergahall and Convent open on the same stage that just the next day Umstammen would be playing on, like it's so funny to just see how much switching happens between the genres. And then having Mirker play on a stage that the next day Zeal and Ardor plays on. It's such a cool eclectic experience. And that's to me what one of the coolest parts of it are. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. You never know what's going to happen next when someone gets up on that stage.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, you got to stay on your toes. So what was it like playing at Midgardsblot together for the first time, if you guys only recently, you know, met and started playing in person?
Was amazing.
It was great.
Yeah,
Amazing.
you guys put on a great show. You guys put on a really great show. It was, yeah, very great experience. Yeah, so I never would have known that was one of your first time like playing together.
Yeah, we haven't been playing since 2017 maybe or something, and this was the first time we were so many people on stage.
Yeah.
But I really think that it's, you know, in Hindarfjäll's music is necessary to have, you know, a lot of people, you know. It's a lot of, you know, choirs and, you know, so but it was, yeah, amazing experience. Yeah.
So what was it like sharing a stage with Johan Hegg?
Surreal.
Is that intimidating?
Yeah.
Surreal. He's such a big presence.
Yeah, the thing is, Johan is, you know, he's the most humble guy. He's the most humble guy. He's just amazing. He's just amazing. And, you know, but this one little sequence when I, you know, I was, you know, beating the shit out of the drum, and I looked up and I saw Johan like looking at me. I was like, yeah, and I was like, fuck yeah, you know. And so you know, it was. I will remember that for the rest of my life. You know, it was great. It was great.
Did you have to get over any stage fright with him, or was it just because you're right? He's a very humble guy. I remember I was lucky enough to get to talk to him briefly, but he's a very down to earth guy. So I was wondering if there was like anxiety at first sharing a stage with him, and then you just had to slowly get over it, or just his personality made you immediately just feel comfortable with it.
Yeah, the thing is, we had met before because we were making the music video for Lab, you know. So we've had some, you know, email contact, and, you know, because of the song, and so we met there, and also, you know, when he was backstage before we entered the stage, it was very like, you know, it was great with the pep talk, you know. It's
he seems like a guy who gives a pretty mean pep talk, like a really effective pep talk. So, yeah, a pep talk from Johan Hegg is definitely on my bucket list. So I'm jealous in that way. So you briefly talked about how Hindarfjäll's music sort of needs a lot of people on stage. So I'm going to use that as sort of a segue into talking about your vision for Hindarfjäll's music in general before we start talking about the latest album, which I absolutely love. I and others would love to hear just your general creative vision for Hindarfjäll. How did it get started? What is Hindarfjäll to you as a musical project?
So I would say it all started like very, very, very early, because it goes back like to my childhood years. You know, I had a grandmother that was very into, you know, the folklores, you know, and, you know, she was in love with nature. So I got really inspired, influenced at you know, an early age. So, but there were some years there that I kind of lost it. You know, I'm not gonna say that it was Guns N' Roses' fault, you know, but because it was not. But it was like the I went into the different kind of music and that stuff, and then when I found black metal, you start to analyze the text and the atmosphere, etc. And then it was like something struck me, because I always, as I told you, been very I always walked in nature, like outside in the forest, and but something happened there when I discovered black metal, and that led me into this kind of music, and I realized like what my grandmother had told me so many years ago. I started to, I don't know, find again, I guess, but in with different eyes, sort of. So why I started Hindarfjäll is, it's because mainly because the music, and that also like the what should I say? Sorry, I'm having a little blackout.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah.
No, but I think I needed that. It was something. I played a lot of metal music before, and it was something that was missing, kind of. So at first, I started in the field early 2015, somewhere, where I just like experimented. Yeah, and it just, I don't know, it came quite naturally.
It's funny that a lot of people that a lot of musicians who I've spoken with, especially the ones who've also played at Midgard's they sort of explain a similar, meandering, and then eventually black metal happens, and then all of a sudden things start to click again. And that's something that I find really interesting, is like black metal has this weird unexplored way of just regrounding people and sort of setting them onto this path towards this music. I find that really interesting. Did you ever have that experience with black metal, Frederik?
No.
No.
No. No. Black metal only made sense to me afterwards.
Okay.
So it's kind of like I can make the comparison to like techno music, which I'm really fond of. I couldn't understand techno music or black metal music unless I was in the intended environment that was supposed to be experienced. So I didn't really understand black metal music before I delved into the Nordic folk genre. But once I was there, I could rediscover or properly delve deep into black metal and the elements that's underlying in that genre. No, for me, it was mostly just personal curiosity and exploration. I've listened to a lot of metal, but not black metal. Yeah,
don't worry. You're allowed to say that. You're allowed to say that. Not everyone. Not everyone has to.
Yeah. I'm happy to sway away from there.
Stay true. Stay true.
I like that. So for Hindarfjäll, am I understanding correctly that your grandmother is behind a lot of the inspiration for it, or is there anything else? That's beautiful. I think that that's really. How can I say this? I think that, not that I knew from listening to your music that your grandmother had something to do with it, but when I listen to Hindarfjäll's music, right, it definitely has that, a different way of communicating that it's from a more traditional view, or a more traditional worldview that is connected to kind of the ways that you learn lessons from your grandparents. So I didn't know that going into this, but now that you've said it, I feel like I see through the matrix, and now a lot of my thoughts are like making sense. So I think your grandmother would be happy. That really goes through your music too.
That's it.
And does that have to do with the language? I'm sorry, you actually go first. I would love to hear what you have to say first. I'll save it.
Oh, okay. No, but
Yeah.
it's like um, I think my grandmother set like a very good like ground, like a platform. You understand
Yeah.
what I mean? So that was what I rediscovered
Mhm.
during my black metal years. And so I would say that Från Tidernas begynnelse, the first album is more like I think that's more about atmosphere than the lyrical, that
Mhm.
like focusing on lyrical themes. And I think it's more setting like this kind of like nature based thing,
Mhm.
but it doesn't really have a strong core, I have to say, because that's when I start to discover things, and I try to experiment with sounds and atmosphere
Mhm.
instead of putting so much focus on the other stuff.
Mhm.
So yeah, but it was mostly like the folklore thing. We could walk in the forest, and she'd be, "Oh, do you see that? Do you see the elf?" I was like, "Ah, yeah, right." And it could be like a tree or a stone or whatever. And it's now I can understand what she meant.
Right.
But back then, when you are 4 or 5 years old, it's like,
It's
is
like,
my
oh,
grandmother crazy?
yeah, grandma's messing with me again. Yeah.
Exactly.
So at least in the latest album, language, I mean, at least for me, it seems like you have a love of language. You know, the languages sort of like switch between songs. I was wondering if that language, that love of language also comes from your grandmother, or does that come from somewhere else?
That comes from somewhere else, I would
Okay.
say. I think that it's it's pretty. I think with the Old Norse, because some songs are in Swedish, some songs are in Old Norse, and then as you said, like it's mixed.
Mhm.
I think we speak about feeling and the atmosphere. I think that the Old Norse brings something to it for sure.
Mhm.
Um, so that's why I choose to have it.
Yep. So you see that there's definitely a difference between languages when you're using them creatively. Like they evoke different feelings, and they'll even evoke different
Absolutely.
feelings depending on what you speak. I mean, I can only speak a little bit of Swedish. It got, sorry to say, it got replaced with Norwegian. But so I was, yeah, I had to learn Norwegian for my degree, and so it just sort of like slowly Norwegian vocabulary just replaced the Swedish.
Mm.
So yeah.
Mm.
So like for me, what I've found is that at least a lot of native English speakers, a lot of the reasons why they listen to this music that's in a foreign language that they don't understand is because they don't have to pay so much attention to what's being said. More important is just like how it's being said and the sound and atmosphere that it's creating. So
Absolutely.
I love seeing artists such as yourselves playing with the different feelings that different languages can evoke. So with that, you talked a little bit about how you felt like your first album. I mean, I would disagree. I feel like your first album had a strong core. As a listener, I feel like it had a pretty defined personality. But so I'm just going to jump off of that and ask, so if you feel like your first album didn't have that core you wanted, how did you approach the newest album differently to sort of give it a stronger core, so to speak, from your perspective?
I think it has to do with time and learning and researching and
Mm-hmm.
experimenting as well. So I would say now, like the second album is more like it has more a more like root to it. You understand what I
Okay.
mean? Yeah.
Is that where the tree metaphor comes in? Yeah.
No, but the thing is, we were talking about that before. We
Mhm.
had, a lot of interesting discussions here.
Mhm.
But the one Einar Selvik that
Mhm.
he says like with the rotlöst trä faller, rootless tree falls,
Mhm.
and that's extremely essential in I would say all ancient cultures,
Mhm.
nature based religions.
Yep.
And so that's also like one thing that's, you know, yeah, it's essential to this kind of music, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, that tree metaphor is definitely, you know, you find that throughout mythologies and folklore and all that. That's something that if you guys aren't familiar with Matthias Nordvig, he's over at the Nordic mythology podcast, and he's with me here at CU Boulder, and he's currently working on, you know, with Runa from Nordic animism on the different tree symbolisms that you find. And so when you guys put out an album that has a tree on the front of it, I know that it's gonna deal with a lot of those subjects of rootedness and all of that. And so how did you go about like approaching rootedness or roots, addressing that a rootless tree falls down through your music in this album?
For me, so why I call it lärodsgrenar instead of Yggdrasilsgrenar is because actually it's because of the etymology. What in English?
Etymology.
Etymology, yeah.
Etymology,
you.
yep.
So, you know, it's a beer.
Here to help. Yeah.
So Yggdrasil,
Mhm.
which is pretty much the Odinistic tree.
Mhm.
We speak about Odin. Ygg, another name for Odin, which means the terrifying, like the terrible, like and Drasil, is like a horse that drags, like what's it called?
That drags you along, that kind of hangs you, and
yeah, it was a
a plow. Yeah.
A draft horse in English would be like a draft horse.
That would be it.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I guess the thing is, we're speaking about the same tree, for sure. But I choose to say lärod instead of Yggdrasil for that reason. I think that it's a lot of misconceptions about Norse mythology, Norse beliefs in general about Odin being the Allfather, the Christianized. You know, we have a lot to thank Snorre Sturlason for that. So I want to, you know, step aside from that, basically. And for me, lärod came from, you know, the idea, which is very essential in the Norse beliefs. If we speak about Asar and Vanir, Asir and Vanir, which is like the Vanir is the gods and goddesses of the earth, while the Asir is the gods and goddesses of the sky.
Okay.
And together they form this alliance, this balance, and balance is something we speak a lot about in in our music and in this genre, like in general. So if you study the album cover, you can see the little Vinja, the rune, in the bottom.
Oh yeah.
And the answers at the top. So that's what it's like. Yeah, it focuses on, I would say, Asir and Vanir, and the balance between the two. Yeah, and it's a lot about cider, it's called, and it should not be like förväxlas.
Exchanged
with Seid is something completely else. Seid, you know, shamanic things. But it's like Seid, it translates to basically custom. And it's the core of the Norse beliefs. It's a way of life, and it's the same. At the same time, it's like you intertwine the religious aspects with the everyday aspects. It's like it's everything is together. So it's not. We make no difference between religious practice and the daily life. It's all, you know. So it's a lot about that, and regarding the Old Norse songs, the old poems, that was more for you know, I wanted to, you know, explore more of the as we spoke about before, like the atmosphere, and then focus more on the music than the text. So that's why I put in some, poems as well. But yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's very interesting. Something you just brought up is how, language is constantly just at the center of this conversation. I think it's interesting that you're approaching, you brought up the fact there are a lot of misconceptions. Where it wouldn't be news to any of us to hear that some people do some unsavory things with Norse myth and Nordic culture and all of that, right? And so one of the struggles that people such as yourselves and me as an educator in Nordic studies here at CU Boulder, we're always trying to think of how to get around that, right? Like, how do you get around these misuses, these misconceptions? And I think that the subtle way you're doing it by just changing the word from Yggdrasil to Leirad, like, I think that's sort of like the key, right? Is that the words carry a lot of meaning, right? People, when people hear a word, they're going to have like maybe a dozen different things go through their heads associated with that word. You even said the word Odinistic, right? For me, when I hear anything like Odinic, Odinist, right, you already have all of these thoughts going through your head of like, oh, what does this mean? But by just sort of talking about the same thing, but using one of the many other words we have to describe it, I think that's a really creative and pretty genius way to go around those misconceptions or assumptions people go into it. So I think that's a really cool way to go about. I like how you went about going around Yggdrasil, and let's use a different way to talk about it that you can now use to make your own meaning with. Yeah. Frederik, do you have anything about the tree symbolism and all that you want to talk about?
Oh gosh. No, I think Nils pretty much covered that, and I think it's very interesting how he researches a lot and puts his own personal thoughts and emotions and ideas into music form, and I think that's very interesting. Yeah.
Cool.
So no, I don't have much to add to that.
All right, no, all good.
No, but speaking about, I had a discussion with some friends some time ago, and we're speaking about, the TV series Vikings. And, because...
You might have heard of it.
You might have
heard of it.
and it's very interesting because we see, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, in Scandinavia or in Sweden, the people wearing Thor's hammers, they were Nazis. Yep. It was like, okay, he has a Thor's hammer. Okay, he's a Nazi. Yeah, for sure. Yep. And it's so, I don't know. But so I think that even though Vikings and all this stuff has made a lot of misconceptions about our history, I think it generates as well, good things. Such as this, like the cultural thing, that it makes our Norse culture, like, it brings it to...
It's been socially accepted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Whereas, because you have to think about as well, is that Sweden, perhaps especially, it's a very consensus-based culture. And so when the consensus is, if you wear a Thor's hammer, then you'll be stigmatized, right? But with this new trend of the TV series Vikings, or other bands or other cultural entities happening, then especially in Sweden, it becomes more and more socially acceptable to express your perhaps your spiritual views or even your cultural heritage, which was very, very taboo for a very, very long time in Sweden. And so it's very fascinating to see now where perhaps younger people or even older people can now finally like let go of that always having to like tiptoe around or like walking on eggshells. Or so it's a fascinating time to see as a Swedish person in Sweden, because I mean, like, it's been growing kind of exponentially, which is also kind of uncommon in Sweden, where things move very slowly.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to culture. So yeah.
I remember when I was 14 or something, and I started to wear Thor's hammer. There were some people that, that's a Thor's hammer, and I was like, it's not Nazi, it's not Nazi. You know, that's how bad it is.
No, I mean, I have that experience here in the States too. I remember when I got my first tattoos, I was always worried that, like, you know, there were you know, these leaves over here and the runes in them, and you know, people would look at this one and be like, is that half a swastika? Like, no, why would I get half a swastika? Like, that just seems like so pointless. But you sort of have to tiptoe around that. But you know, I got these back in 2016, 2017, around then. And I would always get a lot of second glances and everything that early on, but now no one. It's just another rune tattoo. Like, that's all it is now in 2022. And Frederik, I think you brought something up. I love the way you sort of put the spin on it, because for me and Matthias here, you know, we teach the elective here called the Vikings. It's just a class that you can take to fulfill a history credit. And I would say that me and Matthias focus on the negatives, where we get all these students coming in that have no idea what they're about to learn about, and that we have to undo a lot of those misconceptions. And that can be satisfying when you do successfully undo them, but then they can also be frustrating when you just see so many of them. But you just made me realize that I think I at least might have been focusing a little too much on the negatives of just like, oh my God, these kids have no idea what they're talking about. They're coming in and they don't know anything, right? But you're showing me that, like, at the same time, I don't think there would be as many students in that class if it wasn't for the Vikings, the TV show. So it is this balancing act, right? Like, it might create a lot of misconceptions, but at the same time, it's also doing a lot of cultural work in making it more socially acceptable, or bringing it to a wider audience. And I think I prefer that to having to constantly say, not a Nazi, not a Nazi. So yeah, I think this reality is better.
I would agree.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Rather for it to be socially acceptable than to run after you with pitchforks and
I love that. Yeah, that's beautiful. So if we can bring it back to the album, right? You guys are talking a whole lot. I love what you guys are cultivating in me an even deeper appreciation for the album that you guys made. I'm so glad that you guys are sharing this stuff with us. Musically, how do you go about the rooted thing? Choosing instruments, certain sounds. We talked about language, but I would love to hear more about your actual, like, musical approach. Especially because between the two of you guys have a pretty diverse set of musical perspectives.
Yeah. So the thing is, when I started, I had, like, you know, Stenristarna, and I had Mångarm, the acoustic stuff, you know, and I didn't own any, you know, old instrument.
Yeah.
So, like, okay, but we'll go with guitar. You know, and so I'm a guitar player. I've been, you know, since I was 12 years old. So for me, it was pretty natural to include the guitar. And I don't know, I think it's at the same time, I think it's important to I don't know, mash things up, like to not strive, you know, to, you understand what I mean?
No, yeah, I if I'm understanding what you're saying, right? Like, if I can put it into a different example, people think that if you want to do this music, you have to go buy a toggle harpa, you have to go buy a drum, right?
Yeah.
And you have to learn throat singing. And if you don't do those three things, you not even worth trying. And
I have a really
yeah. No, please go.
Sorry.
Yeah. Please go.
About the throat singing. I have a great story about the throat singing.
All right.
So some years ago, I think 2016 actually, I was doing a cover of Völuspá by Hindarfjäll.
Okay.
And there was this, you know, as I was singing, I tried to reach, like, a note, and then I accidentally learned throat singing. I was, it was like, and oh shit, there it is. You know, it was.
Oh, that's great.
was so strange. It was so strange. Sorry, I
No,
just
no,
said
no, no. Thanks for sharing that. I think, because a lot of, I think the throat singing, I was really interested in what you were about to say, because the throat singing, I feel like, is probably the most contentious topic amongst people doing this style of music. There's always a lot of, there are people on the side of, oh, it's just Tuvan. There's nothing Nordic about it. And then there are people on the other side who are like, well, humans use sounds that we hear that we like. So, and then there are two different camps. And, I'm an ethnomusicologist. That's what I do. That's my degree. That's the work that I do, is just in how people make music and how people create ideas around music. And what you just explained is music doesn't have borders, right? Like, it's not like throat singing stays in Tuva. It's like, nope, not gonna leave here. Where you are a guy just in the 21st century who accidentally discovered throat singing by not hitting a high note. And interestingly enough, throat singing in the United States was rediscovered through beatboxing. I don't know if you guys knew this, but when people were trying different beatboxing styles in hip hop in the 80s, when people were trying to do a bass drum, they would just accidentally start doing throat singing. But they would never call it throat singing. But, if people want to go around and label it, be like, oh, this is Tuvan throat singing in a hip hop. And I'm like, no, they just discovered their own throat singing trying to do a bass drum. So I think what you just shared is a beautiful example of how people can accidentally discover sounds, right? Without having to Google, how do I do throat singing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and on the guitar thing, I actually think that that's kind of what makes you guys the most unique. Not to devalue the other stuff you guys do that makes you unique, but the guitar is always really striking to me, because I feel like a lot of people are scared to use the guitar in this style of music, because you can accidentally. I mean, I think a big exception to that is Mirka, right? She absolutely uses a guitar, no problem with it. But I feel like people are scared that if they use a guitar, they're going to come off as just another hippie that just knows Wonderwall, or just another, guy who's just like, all I can do is play guitar, right? So I think it's really interesting that you guys sort of like go through that stigma, through that fear of, oh, am I allowed to do guitar? And you just own it, and you just do your own thing with it, and that creates the unique sound that is Hindarfjäll. So I just wanted to tell you guys, from a listener's perspective, the guitar is sort of what makes it tick for me. I'm like, oh, this is an example of people who are using guitar in this. Cool, awesome, more of this, please. So what else other than the guitar?
The drum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you gotta have
it. Actually, funny story. So I have this friend. He is like a manager. He's a roadie. He's like the driver. He's everything.
Okay,
you name it. He's everything. And he's so handy. He's the handy guy. He can do anything. So we've been talking for some time about we need a drum. I was like, yeah. So one day he calls me and he says, yeah, I went up to the forest and I found this pine tree. So I chopped it down. But it was actually, sorry, it was already dead. It was laying down.
Mm-hmm.
So so he just built a drum. He did some research. It took him 3 months. So that was a drum we used at the latest album, and at the Midgårdsblot, and
I love that. We all have to have a friend like that, where you just send him into the woods for a few hours and he'll come back with something to make a drum with.
Yeah. Robert Elmqvist, shout out.
Yeah, I'm sorry, do you want to say that again?
Robert Elmqvist, shout out.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to make sure that we heard it. Because I mean, it's always good to have someone like that in your life, where it's like, hey, I need this, and then the person just shows up with it. It's like, oh, for sure. Thank you for this. Where'd you get it? Don't ask, right?
Yeah. No, but then it's like flutes, synths, a lot of harmonies. What else?
No, I actually like that you guys actually do use harmonies in more of like a folk music way. Like what most people might associate with, a bunch of people hanging out in a bar and all of a sudden they want to sing a drinking song together. Or even on the other side, the type of harmony that people are used to hearing maybe in a choir hymn or something like that, that type of harmony. And that's another example of something people might be a little nervous to use in this style of music. But again, that with the guitar, that's sort of where your sound comes from. The way that you guys use harmonies are really interesting, and they really add a lot to the experience. The way that you guys sort of like go between sounds is actually what gets me through a whole album without even realizing that I just sat down for 45 minutes to an hour and listened to an album. You guys, like, it definitely keeps things interesting. Now, Frederik, I'm going to assume that are you on the more the post-production or the production side, or do you also do a lot of your own sampling or electronic work in the actual creative process?
With Hindarfjäll, I did the production and the drums and percussion and the synthesizers for the first album. Mm-hmm. But on the second album, I merely contributed by I was honored to share the stage on Midgårdsbild by playing tagelharpa.
Hell yeah.
That was my contribution to the second album. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Is that a cat behind you?
Is there a cat?
Dog? Is there like an animal? Is there an animal?
Yeah, it's yeah.
All of a sudden, this black shape emerges from the couch, and I'm like, what is that? It took me way too long to realize that was a cat. I was like, no, Frederik, look out. No, yeah, I mean, so for the production on the album as well, it's so crisp. You know, I'm going to stop just throwing compliments at you guys nonstop, but I just feel like it has to be said because I am eventually going to get around to doing an actual review of the album that you guys made. So I just wanted to share my thoughts now. Awesome. Because, yeah, definitely you guys are one of those bands where I just want as many people to listen to it as possible. It's sort of why I'm having you guys on here to know more about you guys and the work that you do. Do either of you have a favorite track on the album?
I do. Yeah,
you do?
I think I do. Yeah, I don't know. It's a song that I almost always return to when I listen to the album. It's Hammarens Dawn, and I don't know. Like, it's just something about that song because for me it's so catchy and I don't know. It just speaks to me a lot, I suppose. It's the sound of it, it's the rhythm of it. It pulls you forward. You know that something's happening. I get this storytelling element from it, and then it's like just like the title. It's the sound of the hammer, and so it hits you right from the get-go, I suppose. So I guess that's my favorite track of the album.
You know, I would have to agree that even if, you know, I can't pick a favorite, I have to listen to it a little bit more, but I will agree that around Hammarens Dawn, that's sort of like where the album gets going for me. Like the first two tracks, I'm like, yeah, this is pretty nice. And then like by that track, I'm like, oh, hell yeah. And then that sort of like propels me through the rest of the album every time. So that's absolutely a track for anyone listening who hasn't given this album a spin yet. Definitely Hammarens Dawn. Listen to that one. How about you, Nils?
I would have to say Hednatid, actually. So the thing is, I had this melody 3 years ago. I came up with it, and so I think I was finished with 9 songs, and I had this melody. I think it was Solter Sortna, Hednatid, and one more left. And so Hednatid, there was nothing at all. This melody, I was like, oh, this can be pretty good. So and then when I finished it, I could hear Erik Gravsjö from Monegarm singing it. So I texted him. It was like, yeah. I was like, what the fuck? So because, you know, the Monegarm they have been my house gods since I was 14. So, you know, it was great. It was great.
Have you been to their festival? They run a festival, don't they?
We play there.
You played there. All right, awesome. I had a feeling you did. I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, that festival's on my bucket list. I don't get a lot of chances to go over there, but that's definitely a reason to go over there.
Yeah, you have to go there. You have to go there. It's so cozy. It's so, okay, sorry, it's a metal festival. You can't say cozy.
It's not cozy.
It's brutal.
It's very
It's brutal.
It's
It's
hard.
true.
It's muddy.
It's muddy, and it's
A lot of
Punch in the
blood,
face when you
blood,
It's
just
skulls,
extreme.
screaming.
Yeah, yeah. Extreme in a cozy way. I don't know. It's
very Swedish.
Yeah, I remember I fell in love with Monogarm when I saw what I don't know which member it is, but they posted a picture of themselves in a Johnny Cash t-shirt. And I'm an American musician. I love Johnny Cash. And so when I saw it, I was like, this guy's even cooler than I thought he was. Like, hell yeah, Johnny Cash.
Yeah, but that must, I think that must be Erik. I'm sure.
That has to be Eric. Okay, cool.
I think so.
I'll go back and double check. So I guess, but before we get wrapped up here, I want to know what's next for you guys. You guys working on anything at the moment, or always working on something? Anything you want to tell us about what might be coming up? I know you guys just released a new album, but people always want to hear what's coming next with you guys.
You wanna go first?
You go first.
Okay.
I haven't. If I get a beer, and then you start.
Okay. So I have this project called Torulf, right? So right now I've been working on the same album for almost 2 years. Not by choice, but circumstances happened, and I had to prolong the process. But I've almost finished it now, and it's an album that. So the way that I make music is that I use storytelling based on personal experiences that I translate into almost like a mythical tale by using music. My albums, I see themselves as books, with each song as chapters. So I try to make each song like storytell into the other song, and so it has this kind of role to it.
Awesome.
But that takes a long time to make, apparently. But I feel like I'm almost finished. I know that I keep saying that, but it's true. So I'm working on my second album right now, and I'm very, very excited what I have right now, but it's not there yet. It's not quite there yet. So I want to spend a bit more time.
Oh yeah, no rush. You can't rush that. You can't rush that stuff. It's like when it's ready, it's ready. I know, like, as a musician, it's frustrating when you have to say, "Oh, it's almost done," and like 3 years later, you're like, "It's still almost done."
I know, and I need people around me that tell me that as well. Like, I won't release anything, but luckily I do. So, so yeah, that's in the works, and I got some side projects as well, some personal projects that's kind of boiling, cooking in the kettle right now, but not ready to fully express it verbally yet. But that will come soon enough.
Yeah, and actually, Frederik, I would actually really love it if we've been talking mostly about Hindarfjäll so far. I would actually love it if you could just tell us a little bit more about the music that you make. Like the style it is. Tell us a little bit more about, like, you just said a little bit more about storytelling, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about just like what it is you do as Torulf.
Yeah, so the project is, I tried to keep this short. The project is basically a personal project that I want to infuse my own personal experiences with music and within the genre of Nordic tribal. So when I approach an album, or when I approach music making, I approach it as I want to convey a story, and that story could be based upon personal experiences. And the name Torulf I got from when I was a child. Again, like a childhood kind of theme, I guess. That when I was a child, my dad used to make up these bedtime stories to me and my brother about a character named Torulf, and he was a red-headed Viking, and he used to go all around the world on different kind of adventures. Say, like, he used to go to Anglo-Saxon Britain or to Ireland, or he used to go to Vinland or the Franks or even to Japan, learn how to make a katana sword. And it was like one of those bedtime stories that you grow up with, then you forget. And then when you're an adult, and then I heard Hedningarna, and something just clicked. It's like, oh, wait, I do have that kind of background in my childhood. So I was trying to almost to like use that childhood storytelling with the character of Torulf, but do it my own way and do it like musically. And that's my project. That's the Torulf project. And yeah, I guess like most things, they start in childhood years.
I'm so glad I got to squeeze that out of you, because I think that's a really good way to sort of like entice people, if they haven't heard of your music yet, to sort of go and check it out. Because I have that same experience. Whenever I sit down and start writing music, it always somehow becomes a story, almost to the point where it frustrates me. I'm like, I don't want to tell a story right now, but my brain's like, nah, dude, you're telling a story. So it's at the point where if I want lyrics that aren't a story, I just have someone else do it, because something about my brain always makes it a story. So I relate to that. Absolutely, and that's going to make me sort of view your first album differently next time I go through and listen to it. I love that, how just sort of like taking that childhood character and sort of like using it as a new mode of storytelling. That's pretty awesome. So thanks for sharing that with us. Nils, Hindarfjäll, anything in the works that you can?
I guess I could say that album number 3 is in the making. It's gonna be 13 songs. So it's gonna
spoil us.
So yeah, and it's gonna be, this time it's gonna be very focused on the core of the Norse beliefs. And I don't say belief, but because they were never a belief. But so, like, you know, and it's, I don't know if I should tell you. Yeah, I will tell you the title.
Hell yeah.
It's gonna be called Sedan, which is either the custom. And it's probably gonna be a trilogy.
Awesome.
Yeah, because it needs to have 3 parts, I think. But yeah, it's in the making, but it's gonna take some time. And
as I said, no rush. But yeah, I love that you just pointed that out, that it's, you know, it's funny, this is one of the things that blows my students' mind the most. But I'm like, there was no one way of just being Nordic in the Iron Age, right? Like, it's a big place. I like it. It's almost like a surprise to them when I explain that Scandinavia is the size of like the whole United States East Coast. So like when people think like, oh, it's just one shared thing across all of these tribes and cultures and whatever. And when I point out to them that that's not how it is, it's sort of like, whoa, where they never considered the fact that maybe not everyone had the same beliefs or way of life in the Iron Age. Maybe it was just as diverse as it is now, maybe even more so. So I'm looking forward to seeing how you explore that through music. That's very, as I said, enticing is the word I'm going to use. Definitely looking forward to that.
Oh, sorry.
No, please go.
No, but actually, we are me and Frederik are planning on doing some stuff as well. So it's gonna be really interesting. And the thing is, we are both from Gautland, Götaland, not Svealand.
Okay, yeah,
it's important. Okay, you know, speaking of tribes and that's so it's gonna be about that. That's all.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hell yeah, looking forward to it, guys. Seriously. So where can people find you? Frederik, you first. If people want to follow you, keep up to date with what you're doing, where can they find you?
You have TikTok?
I don't have TikTok, actually. I refuse. No, but I guess Instagram is like the only place that I'm active on.
Okay.
So if you have that, then you can follow me there.
Yeah. Is that just Torulf? like just search
Torulf.
Torulf and they'll find you?
Official, and you'll find me.
Hell yeah.
And my music is on Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, and all of that stuff. Yeah.
All right, cool. And Nils, where can people find you?
Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, actually.
You are.
Yeah.
How dare you?
I don't know. I had to remind myself when I said it.
Right.
TikTok, I'm like, I have a TikTok right now. I think there's only like 2 videos or something. Yeah, but mainly Instagram, Facebook, Spotify. You know. Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, guys, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day, especially with the little scheduling mishap I had. Time zones are still very difficult for me, apparently. But I really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to come sit and chat with a stranger from across the pond. I've learned a lot about you guys, and I hope that someone listening is going to, you know what? No, I know that people listening are going to now have a different perspective, appreciation of what you guys do. So thank you for sharing that stuff with us today, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, please don't be a stranger. And if you guys are going to be at Midgardsblod next year, I'll be sure to find you, seek you out of that crowd, so we can meet in person, maybe. So again, thank you guys so much. Take care. Please don't be a stranger, and I'll see you around. All right.
Thank you.
All right, cool. See you guys later.
Take care.
Bye.